What's up, YouTube? Today I'm going to be doing a video discussing some things that I think need to be discussed as far as performing magic goes. So yeah, this video is basically just going to be targeted towards magicians and magicians that perform and care about magic. So yeah, if you aren't, I think this will be really boring. So there'll be more videos later in the future, so just stay tuned. Just basically going to be like scattered thoughts about the idea of overproving and why that doesn't make sense, and like I'm just going to be diving into it. But yeah, we're going to look at a video by Rise Magic. The reason why I chose to do Rise Magic, there's plenty of magicians out there that make videos talking about that you shouldn't overprove and stuff, and like they give advice to people that doesn't seem right. But I like Rise Magic. They have amazing content, and I think that if I do their video, I'll take like a less aggressive approach and just like talk about why some of the things don't work and like the concepts behind the overproving and why that's bad, supposedly. So yeah, we're just gonna jump right into the video. I'm going to like skip around the video just to go to like the key points, and then I will give my thoughts about it and like show you guys some examples. And yeah, so let's just get started.
Don't run when no one's chasing you. That is my favorite phrase when it comes to how you should perform magic.
Okay, that's the first thing I guess that's a good place to start. So the first thing they mention is don't run when no one is chasing you. Overproving, basically, how magicians tell other magicians to don't overprove is they give the reasoning that you shouldn't run when no one is chasing you. And I have a very big problem with that reasoning, because if you think of magic and magic tricks like very objectively and think about, okay, so what does a magician do? He shows someone magic tricks, right? Obviously. But at the end of the magic trick, let's just get like right when at the end of a magic trick and the spectator reacts and they're like in disbelief. Why are they in disbelief? Because they saw something that they know, they saw something unexpected that shouldn't be able to happen, right? That's like the main reason why people like seeing magic and why spectators give reactions, is because something doesn't make sense to them, basically. And it's in a positive way that it doesn't make sense. Like magicians show people things so that they don't make sense because it's interesting and it's like, it is cool. But in that sense, like, why are they in disbelief? It's because they paid attention of everything you did, right? They didn't see anything really weird that happened, and yet this playing card changed into a different playing card. Like, that's just the simplest example I could think of. But like, think of that, like that shouldn't be possible if you're a spectator looking at a magic trick. So when magicians tell other magicians don't run when you're not being chased, it doesn't make sense to me. Because I get what they're saying is whenever they're talking about running, they're talking about magicians overproving stuff by like saying like, oh look, all the cards are different, or oh look, this is one single card. But when you think about it, you're trying to fool them. Like I know that like that's the point of magic in the most objective sense, is they're trying to fool the spectator, and you're trying to fool them by them not knowing what you did, and then it's a positive thing because they're in disbelief and give a positive reaction, right? I mean that in the best way as possible, because I know a lot of magicians say, oh, it's not about fooling your spectator. In the most objective sense, it really is you showing them something that fools them in a good way where they're in disbelief. So in order for that to happen, you need to be running so that they don't understand what you're doing. Because if they do understand what you're doing, then they don't like it doesn't. There's no reaction. There's no magic if they know what you're doing. It's just them seeing you move things with cards, or them seeing you do something weird with a coin. So they're chasing you, and that is a good thing that they're chasing you. Is also what I think. Because if your spectator isn't chasing you in your magic trick, essentially what you're saying is that they don't care about what you're doing. They're not being attentive to you. They're not paying attention to the trick that you're doing. If you say that they're not chasing you, because chasing, most magicians will mean that as in like trying to bust you, but like people even think like that's a bad thing, that when spectators try to figure out what a magician is doing, people think that's a bad thing, when it's like it's the most natural thing to do, because that's the whole point of magic, is that they won't know what you did by the end of the trick. So as a magician, just know that if people are trying to figure out what you're doing and trying to like bust you, not to be aggressive, but just to like be interested in what you're doing, take that as a really good thing. That is not a bad thing at all. You want your spectator to chase you while you do a trick, and at the end of the trick, when they've chased you this whole time and they still couldn't figure out what you did, that is a good thing. That's when you get the best reactions. But if you act like you're not running and that you shouldn't prove things to your spectators while you perform, then you'll get a result that isn't right. I'll talk more about that after we watch. So this is like the first 30 seconds of the video, and I already get into how that is a bad, terrible analogy to tell magicians. But the thing that I want to talk about is like, I know that these magicians are giving advice about overproving in a way that's supposed to help, right? Because they give examples that magicians will say too much things like, oh look, this is one single card, look, you see, it's one card, or oh look, it's in the middle, you see, it's definitely in the middle of the deck, when in reality it's like something fishy is going on. But whenever they say don't do that, like don't run because people aren't chasing you, in that specific scenario, they're not fully right, because they're the magician who's overproving, they're just not proving in the right way, in my opinion. They are overdoing it, correct, but they're not. They should be running. I'll go into that more. Let's just continue.
Because see, there's something to be said for being so smooth, so casual, and so unassuming when you perform magic, that suspicion is never even called into question.
Okay, so he makes a good point. That he makes the point of overproving leads you to not be as smooth when you perform. And I think that that's right in a certain sense, right? Because instead of using the word overproving, I'm just going to use the word proving. Because in my opinion, when they say overproving, really to me it just means proving in the right amount. It's just proving in the wrong way is when they say overproving. So to be like, you can still prove, you can still overprove or prove correctly while being smooth. And it's better to overprove than to not prove enough and be smoother, in my opinion, because you'll get a better reaction if you overprove and do everything right than if you don't overprove and you're smooth, in my opinion. I'll go into that more later, but that you can still be smooth and prove. You just need to understand it's not about what people are saying, because like what they're trying to do is to prove to the spectator that what they're doing is fair, usually. It's not about that. It's about how you do it, right? It's not about what you say, it's about how you say it, or what you do is just how you do it, right? So instead of proving that like, oh, I'm gonna do a tilt, oh, that's definitely in the center of the deck, why don't I just do it and not say anything, right? So I'm proving, like I can pause here and prove that it's in the middle of the deck. That's a way of proving without having to do it, right? So like, instead of having to prove, okay, like let's say I do a color change, right? Where I change a 6 into a 3. And let's just say I want to prove that I didn't put a 3 on top of the 6. Because maybe you have like a smart spectator, or like this is something you can do that is proving, but it's not over proving. It's the same thing. So let's just say, and look, I didn't put a card on top of the other card. Like, let's just say I said, okay, that's a bad example. So basically how the method works is I put a 3 on top of the 6, and that's how it looks like it changes, right? Like, that's the method behind it, right? But instead of saying, look, the card's not even underneath it, right? That's a terrible way to prove that, because now you're making it suspicious. That's what they're talking about. But it's not about what you say, it's how you say it, right? So in that case, instead of saying, look, it's only one card, you could simply just pick it up and flick it, right? That looks completely natural. And it shows that the 6 isn't underneath. So if I do that, and then just place it back, and then get into the next trick, then it's so smooth, and I proved to them, like, let's just say, like, I just did this change where it goes on top, and it changed, and then in their mind, they're thinking, I wonder if it's underneath. Instead of saying, oh, look, it's not underneath, then it's like, it's super suspicious because you knew that question would come into mind. But if you just do this, and you just flick the card, and then place it down, it's super smooth, and you're proving without having to be awkward about it. You're not drawing suspicion towards it. So that's my example of you can still be smooth and prove right, instead of not proving and leaving your audience with suspicion or doubt or any of that. So I think that's the most important thing I want to talk about in this video, is that that's the first thing I wanted to cover, was that you just need to prove in the right ways. Is just think about what you're doing and think about in the spectator's position of what you're doing is awkward or not. All right, so let's continue.
Thing that bothers me that I see a lot is magicians that overprove their performance. They narrate and answer the questions the spectators might ask before they even ask them.
So here he said, he gave the good example of overproving, like proving in the wrong way, is narrating what you're doing and answering questions that your spectator may have before, even if they don't even ask them, right? So that's what people shouldn't do. That is a correct thing to say, right? So if I say that, okay, I'm going to take this 3, I'm going to put it in the middle of the deck, and look, that's in the middle, no tricks, no nothing, and look, there's no breaks. That is a good example of proving in the wrong way. Instead of this would be, oh, that's a blank card. This would be a good reason. This would be a good way to do it, right? So I do this. I don't even say anything. Watch. We'll just leave your cards somewhere in the center, and then that's it. Like there's no, like, you don't have to. I'm proving that I'm putting in the center by spreading out. Super fair. I don't say anything. I don't have to narrate. Just press it in the middle. There. You don't see any breaks. That's it. You can prove without narrating. I think that's a good point, is to not narrate, not to answer questions by narrating those answers to them. That's a good point. All right, so now let's look at his exaggerated example.
If you don't know what overproving is, let me show you an exaggerated example really quick. Now you might think this might be a trick deck and magicians use trick decks. That's not true. As you can tell, there are 52 playing cards, and they're all different and they're all shuffled. It's a completely normal deck of cards. So you could even shuffle it, and it's not ruining any stack or anything because it's just a completely normal deck. It's not a trick deck, in case you were curious. So watch. Let's take the top card, right? The 8 of spades. Watch. We take this singular card, this one card, the 8 of spades, and turn it over. Now we're going to take that 8 of spades and put it in the middle of the deck. Now you can tell that's actually in the middle of the deck, right? There's no sleight of hand. It is in the middle of the deck. You might think it's not in the middle of the deck. It's in the middle of the deck. Now watch as I cleanly, with no sleight of hand, push that 8 of spades into the middle, so it is completely lost. There are no breaks. Do you see any breaks? I don't see any breaks. It's completely lost. It's completely lost. Now watch. If we snap our fingers, no sleight of hand, we turn over. You see what I'm saying?
So in this example, they do give, that is a good example of what not to do when you're performing. However, in this video, they don't give something to like supplement that need to prove what you're doing is correct, right? So when someone gets wants to prove that this is a single card when it's 2 cards, right? So when someone is here and they say, look, I'm gonna take this one single card, that's the 2, and I'm gonna put it in the middle, right? When someone does that, they do that because they know how the method works, right? Because they know they have 2 cards and they're drawing unnecessary suspicion, but there's a way that you can do it, right? So like, this is a good example, right? And so instead of having to say that it's 1 card, you can just show it by doing this, right? And it's 1 card, and then you can do something mechanically that shows that it's also 1 card, right? So if I go like this, it's 1 card, right? So like, there's methods that you can do to prove more methods. I don't know if that makes sense, right? So watch. This is a double, king and a 2. I'm gonna take this card, and I say this card. I don't say this 1 card. I'm gonna take this card, right? That's something super normal to say. It doesn't draw suspicion, right? So, oh, I'm gonna take this card. Oh, I'm gonna take this water bottle. You're not doing anything saying, oh, I'm gonna take this 1 water bottle. You're not saying a quantity. You're saying, okay, I'm gonna take this card, and we're gonna take it and leave it somewhere in the middle, right? It's changed. And I did a method to show that it was 1 card even more. So I proved in the good way, right? So like, okay, I'm gonna take this king, I'm gonna leave it here. It's already switched, right? And it's 1 card. I don't have to even say that, so watch. So in performance, I'd say this. All right, we'll take this card, right? And we'll leave it somewhere, and we'll lose it somewhere in the middle. And then you go through the rest of the routine. That's how you supplement narrating and over-proving in the bad way by doing it in a good way. So I'm just saying this card, right? I'm not saying this 1 card or anything like that. So you can prove what you're doing the same way you could when you narrate. You just have to think about why what you're doing, why it makes sense, and then how to narrate it without bringing suspicion to it. So take this card. That's just a little something you're changing, this one card to this card. It's little things you have to realize, like, I don't need to prove that much because this does the same exact thing, right? So that's all I just want to mention there.
It's not a good look. And while that was exaggerated, people do that.
People do that. That's a good point. People do try to hide the method by basically saying what the method is doing. Like doing a double lift, they're basically saying this is one card. And they're basically exposing the method without even needing to expose the method because saying that it's one card, it's like, why would I need, that's obviously one card. So now, why'd you say that? That might be two cards now. Like, they might not like that thought process, but they might come to weird questions that will damper the reaction and the spectator's experience after the trick is done.
But my main point is, if you're performing for a spectator, a true layman, you just saying this isn't a trick deck, or look, there's 52 cards, or look, there's no doubles, or look, it's only one card, or look, it's a shuffled deck, that brings into question in their mind, why would he say it in the first place?
Basically exactly what I just said is like, why would you bring it up in the first place, right? So, but there are ways to supplement this, right? So instead of saying, okay, I don't have a trick, this isn't a trick deck, I could just simply show the cards like this, or just hand it to them, right? Or just saying like, this isn't in a stacked deck. Instead of saying that, I could just shuffle the deck, right? That's normal. I just answered a question before there was a question even. So I'm proving something to them because they need to be following along, because they need to be paying attention to what I'm doing, and they need to be questioning what I'm doing. I think that's good for people to question what you're doing if you're doing a magic trick for them. All right, so let's keep going.
Now, I think we do this because of Instagram and YouTube. Now, obviously, performing for magicians and your peers is a very healthy experience and it helps you get better. But magicians make up 0.0000001% of the population. Laymen make up 99.9999. You get the point. So when you tailor your performance to magicians and trying to fool them, you're definitely going to overprove because you're trying to show them what you're not doing.
So here he talks about why he thinks people overprove in the first place. And he mentions like the fact that we, as magicians, share with other magicians, and that's why we overprove. And I think that has a little bit to do with it. Like, I've seen people overprove that never talk to a magician in their life. So I really don't think that that's the example to give. I think why people overprove is because the magician who knows the method knows how the trick works, right? So if I know how the trick works, if I know that there's a control in the middle, then and maybe I just don't want to get busted, then I need to overprove. I need to prove to the spectator that I'm not doing anything fishy. And then by doing that, it makes them think that something fishy is going on. So I don't think it has to do with magicians being surrounded by other magicians and having to perform to them and showing magicians what they're not doing. I think it really has to do with you knowing the method and then you wanting to cover up like the awkward parts of the method. Because methods, like how tricks work, are very awkward. Like if you really think about it, like think about any trick, like I don't know, like think about a double lift. Like I can make it seem like not awkward, but in most methods, even if they're supernatural, I think that there can be a way that the method is like kind of awkward in every situation. Even if they're like super smooth methods, I don't know. I think that just awkward methods in general are awkward. And if you keep that in mind and you can prove the awkwardness by just things that you do and things that you say like slightly, then you don't need to overprove. But you are running. You're running and being chased. You still are running and you still are being chased. You just are doing it in a way that's super unsuspicious by keeping in mind, by thinking how a spectator would think when you show someone a trick. That's something to keep in mind. Like whenever you're practicing, like think, okay, this is how the spectator would see me doing this, right? So it's like, okay, that looks normal. That's what I would think. But yeah, let's keep going. Okay, I'm gonna skip this point where he's talking about basically that people perform for magicians.
And it will make your performances seem so much more natural, smooth, and just classy when you're just elegantly performing the trick for someone who has most likely never seen magic before. Believe it or not, most people just have not seen magic in person before, and you can treat that experience like that and give them a great impression without saying, hey look, 52 normal cards, hey look, this isn't a trick deck.
So here again, he's reiterating, like, you don't need to prove to some, like a normal spectator that doesn't know a lot about magic, that this is a normal deck of cards, or hey look, this is not in stack, or this is one card. That's a good point. I think that's a okay point to say don't narrate, but what people like me, or like people who are younger, or people who are getting into magic, what they will lose in translation of him saying this to people is, okay, I shouldn't prove anything, like, that I'm not doing anything fishy, and then what's going to end up happening is they're going to mess up somehow, like they're going to do something awkward, and then the spectator that isn't into magic or at all, they're going to see it, and they're going to be awkward. They're going to know that something fishy happened, and by the end of the trick and the climax has happened, they're going to have either a fake reaction because they think they saw something, or they saw something weird, and that's going to like put a damper on the reaction that they give, or they're just going to give a fake one because they think that they caught you, but in reality they just saw you do something fishy without you proving that you, like, we're going to go into that after in a little bit in the video when he talks about don't like have the spectators ask questions, like we'll talk about in a sec. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
You see what I'm getting at? It is a slippery slope, right? You have to narrate the trick, but just relax and answer the questions when they come, not before they come. Don't run when no one's chasing.
Here, this is the biggest thing that I like. This is what made me really want to make this video, is that even, I'm not talking Rise Magic does this all the time, but just so many magicians say this to people as advice, and they say, don't answer questions when they come, ask them. Don't answer questions before they come, ask them when they come, right? So let's just think about this, because I've had so much personal experience with this that that's why it bothers me so much. So when you do a trick to someone, right? Let's just say, at the end of the trick, let's just say this happens, right? So let's just say, bam, the card changed. And then they're left to react, right? So they need to react right now. When they need to react, they might be questioned. They might have questions of what you did. Like, say you did something fishy. Like, let's say you had a card here, and then you went like this before the trick happened, right? And then you did the change. Then you do the change here, and you take this card, the 2, and then you change it to the selected card or whatever. So, as a spectator, I'm a spectator right now, and I just saw this happen. The change is cool, right? I'll be like, I'll question what happened, but then I'll be like, then I'll ask the magician, why did you move the cards like that? That was kind of like, why'd you do, you just put my card on the top. And then the magician, you are in this position where you have to answer the questions after the effect has already happened. And even if you answer it right, it doesn't matter. Like, even if you say, oh, I didn't do any, it was in the middle the whole time, or like, even no matter what explanation you give, even if it's a good one, even if you didn't do anything fishy, like, if they have a question in their mind and they question you just a little bit, even if you prove to them that you didn't do anything fishy, then it doesn't matter, because the conclusion of the trick has already happened. They didn't react well, they didn't like the experience, and when you prove them wrong, then there's like a power balance that is happening. It's just, you need to be able to prove what you're doing so that they don't question stuff later. Because, like, let's say, like, I do a color change where it changes like that, right? So in essence it changed, but let's just say I covered it, like I palmed a card and it changed. Okay, dumb method, but let's just say that happened. And then I continue with the trick by doing something. And then later they ask, didn't you just put a king on top of the 4? And like, let's just say like that was just a small part of the trick, right? Let's just say like you made the king disappear later. Like, where'd the king go, right? Like, let's say they didn't know how you did that, but with that question in their mind, the whole performance that you just did is kind of down the drain. Like, think about, like, I've seen so many spectators do this to me and to other people, where like they'll question something you did, and like negate everything else. So you just need to make sure that you're not overdoing it by narrating what you're doing, what they said. You don't have to say this is a normal deck. You can just, there's supplements to it, right? So I'm giving you a supplement. Spread the deck out. Let them shuffle it. If it is a trick deck, right? With some tricks are done with trick decks, sure, right? So you don't have to give it to them, right? So you have to work around the method and prove things without being awkward still. So let's say this is a trick deck and I'm able to show just the bottom and top card. So how can I prove this is a normal deck? I can place this deck on the table, face up, right? So like I'll talk to the spectator, I'll place it face up. They see just a normal card, no trickery. Let's just say all of these are blank cards underneath, right? So if this is here, they see it, oh, that's in their mind now, it's a normal deck. Then you do some flourishes, right? Like just while you're talking. They see a normal card, they think it's a normal deck, right? And you can do a fan this way. It's a normal deck, right? But let's just think that all these middle cards in between are blank. Then you've already proved to them that it's a normal deck without being awkward, right? So that's just supplement narrating awkwardly that draws suspicion to proving correctly by doing small things that prove and doing little narration bits that aren't suspicious, right? So I want to give you guys a good example here. So watch, I take the king, right? Leave it, we'll lose it somewhere in the deck, somewhere near the middle, right? Fair, like that fair, whatever. Okay, what I said there was good because I'm not saying, okay, we're gonna take the king, lose it somewhere in the middle, right? I'm not saying that yet. So the method is I'm doing a pullback pass. So I'm gonna show you what a pullback pass is right now. So I'm pulling back this half and I'm basically transferring it to the top. So if I did that with the queen face up here, now it's on top, right? So that's a control. So how do I prove that I'm not doing anything awkward while I do it? How do I be smooth with it, right? So here's an example. Here, tell me when to stop. Here, all right, get this card memorized. We'll lose it in the pack, somewhere near the middle. Right? I'm not proving, I'm not over proving, but I am answering questions before they come in a way that isn't suspicious, right? So watch. When I place it in the middle, like things I say, I'm narrating still, right? So we'll leave it in the middle. Or like, okay, I said, stop here. We'll lose it in the middle. And how I explain why I pull back, right? So I have a break back here, but it doesn't look like a break. It really doesn't. It looks like I just dribbled cards on. Then I lift from the break. Then I do the pullback pass, which is really weird and awkward, right? No matter what you think. And I pull back, and as I pull back, and I say somewhere in the middle, right? And then I spread. So doing that instead of saying we're gonna leave it somewhere in the middle, look, like doing this is awkward. So how you make it smooth is by saying, okay, we're gonna lose it in the deck somewhere in the middle, right? So somewhere in the middle. But while you say that, you're proving to them that you're not doing anything awkward. Like this is an awkward thing, but by saying somewhere in the middle in that line, it's not as awkward because you're showing them, right? That's the excuse, is you're showing them. I know this is really specific, but you can really tie this in with any method, and you can prove little things that ease suspicion so much by just the things you say and the things you do, instead of having to tell them directly, this isn't a trick deck, this is only one card, you know? Like, you can just do that without needing to be super adamant about drawing no suspicion to it. And yeah, that's basically what I would say. Let's keep going. Okay, answer questions before they come, not after they come. I just talked about that. Let me just reiterate. It's because when people ask questions after you do the trick, it dampers the reaction and their experience overall. Straightforward. Look at as many examples as you want. If I were to do like a test where I did overproving subjects over here and subjects that didn't overprove, and let's just say at the end the spectators over here didn't have any questions at the end because they proved right, like they were proving throughout the whole routine without being super awkward. They just proved little things by flicking a single card. They showed that it wasn't normal, just like little things, right? This is as a magician's perspective. They just proved correctly, and then they had a reaction. They didn't have any questions, right? They didn't have any suspicions because they started to prove questions that they haven't even asked yet in a good way, because it's very subtle. It's not, hey, look, this is one card. It's, hey, you just flick the card. Like, okay, oh, Like if they did draw one question while you're performing and then you disprove it, it's like even more of a reaction if you think about it. And then say over here is subjects that they performed and they didn't answer anyone's questions. They maybe some spectators thought it was a trick deck, some spectators thought that they did double lists. They may have not even done those things. That's the thing. And their reaction, those spectators' reactions and experiences will be less than these people's over here. That's just something I want to say. If you think about it for a little bit and you see yourself perform and then you see these things pop up, it will start to make more sense. And I think what they're doing, what Rise Magic and all these other magicians are saying, they're overcorrecting basically, is because when people do overprove by like being awkward and saying directly like, oh, this is one card, that is true. That's not something you should do because you're drawing suspicion. But by saying that you shouldn't do that, the magicians think, okay, so I shouldn't prove anything. But that's not true. You do need to prove. You need to prove a lot too. So here he goes into proving examples more. I'm going to skip through this. You guys will find the link to this video in the description if you want to look through it and then think about what I said and then try to like see how, okay, what he's saying is right, but not in this sense. You know, like you can just watch this video after I talk about it.
So a heckler, let's view that as catching on fire. It's awful, and you want to know what happens when that heckler comes into play. But believe it or not, hecklers are few and far in between. Lots of you guys ask me how to deal with hecklers, and I can get into that in another video. But true hecklers, people who are out there just to destroy you and ruin your performance, in 6 years of performing magic for people, I can maybe remember 2 or 3.
Okay, so here he says the word true hecklers, right? And he says people who are out there to ruin it for you. So this is like another really important thing I want to talk about is when he says true hecklers, he says out to get you, right? He uses that like phrase. That's a key phrase in my opinion. He's right that those are very rare to see them because I've only had like 1 or 2 that were out to be a dick, right? That's very rare to see. But people might disagree with me. Here's what I'm talking about. So he's right that people will do that, and then it's hard to prove to them like what you're doing is suspicious because they're literally out to ruin you, right? But what I think is not rare, and I think like 1/4 of your audience spectators will be defensive hecklers. I know this is weird to think about, but let's just dive into this concept real quick. So defensive heckler is something that I see a lot, and I think a lot of performers, or mainly magicians, think of defensive hecklers as normal hecklers, and they deal with the situation wrong because they messed up, and a defensive heckler responds to them messing up, and it comes off as mean, or if it comes off as like trying to bust your balls, but it's really not, because defensive hecklers, in my opinion, so there's this weird thing when you're a magician and you're showing someone a trick. Because as I talked about, it's about fooling someone. And like fooling implies that person is a fool. He's foolish. And that's not a positive thing. Even though we try hard to like not have that at all, there shouldn't be any power difference so that they feel stupid if you do fool them. So the reason why defensive hecklers like react whenever you mess up is because the whole like tricks they're not even meant to, but they make people feel silly if they're fooled by them. So people want to show that, hey, I'm not stupid because I saw you do this. And I feel like they are right most of the time to point out that you kind of messed up. And I think if you do mess up and they don't point it out, or like they saw you do something and you don't know that they saw you do something, by the conclusion of the trick and when they should be reacting, they're going to give you a fake reaction or a dampened reaction and then ask you a question, which kind of makes you like feel defensive because they saw you do something that they shouldn't have saw you do, and then it's your fault because you messed up. And then people think that person is a heckler, when in reality they should be defensive because they are chasing you, because you're supposed to be trying to fool them. It makes sense if you really think about how people react when you show them magic and different ways that they think of. Most of the time it makes sense. Aggressive hecklers don't make as much sense, but I mean, as he said, they're rare. So that's also that's right. It's just you need to understand that defensive hecklers, in my opinion, if you really think about it, being a spectator and like wanting to figure something out and then seeing something, it makes sense to be that way, to be kind of, oh, I saw you do this. It's like, yeah, I did see you do that, so why shouldn't I tell you? You know, like, why should I fake a reaction? It makes sense. So yeah, right here when he says,
just kidding, don't make your spectators ever look stupid. That's not a good look.
I don't think that's I really disagree with. He's like, that's not a good look. I don't think you should be worrying about it if it looks bad or not. I think it should be, you shouldn't do that because that's wrong to make someone look stupid. Okay, that's just something I had to say. I'm going to go through some other little parts and then see if I have anything else to say. So here he says,
but what I'm saying is you can advance and counteract the heckling before it even starts. That's a whole separate video.
Before, like, advance and counteract the hecklers before it even starts. How do you do that? You prove what you're doing isn't suspicious. That's it. So you're supposed to overprove. Oh, it's silly. It's silly. It's so silly to have to reiterate what I'm saying, but it's like I don't know. Okay, whatever. Okay, let's get to these last bits. I'm going to stop and then watch a few things and then talk about it.
But I feel like I've done it enough where I can give some advice on how to perform.
So here, he says he's giving advice, right? But in my opinion, all he's saying is don't do this. And he gives like exaggerated examples, but he doesn't give anything to supplement it. And he doesn't talk about what will happen if you don't prove what you're doing, because then you're going to go into the problems I talked about earlier. So yeah, that's the end of this video. I really want to talk about this to a lot of more people. Like, I want to have discussions in the comment section, but I'm never that person to comment on people's videos. I don't know why. I'm just not. So I know people won't comment on my video, but it's just, I just want to like talk about it, because it's not like I'm trying to make an aggressive like, oh, you're wrong. I'm just like, I'm trying to think of why that doesn't like make sense in my head, because I perform too. Like, I perform to people, and it's like, that doesn't work really. Like, you have to prove what you're doing isn't just like, you have to do it. You just have to do it right. And it's like, I don't know why like certain videos like this don't sit right in my head. Okay, here's a little bit from Chris Ramsey where he talks about magicians trying to overprove after, and here.
Or magicians often overprove after the trick's done to try and amplify an effect and tell you how impossible every single little component of the effect was while you're reacting. And put yourself in the mind of a spectator. You're trying to process this information already. Throwing more information at me, it's just going to take more time for me to process, and eventually I might just lose interest and move on.
So as you just heard him say, people, whenever they want to get more of a reaction by like answering questions like throughout, like, dude, you signed it, I didn't do anything fishy, right? Like, it's a great point. Like, I know Chris Ramsey talks about overproving, how it's a bad thing, but here he's giving a great example to what Rise Magic was saying, as far as answer the questions after the trick is done. Like, don't answer them before they come, answer them after they come. Like, if you answer those questions after they come, then you're trying to get more reaction. It's the trick's over. There's nothing else to really prove. So yeah, it's interesting that Chris Ramsey said that. I completely agree with him. Like, that you shouldn't try to get more reaction by overproving after. And yeah, I just think this is an interesting topic. So yeah, more videos soon, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys get something to think about now, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.